Hello there, this is MTG Degree, my name is Luke, and today we're going to talk about some deck building mistakes that might occur during the Shadows over Innistrad pre-release. I was looking at the list of cards and I said, oh man, this is going to be a tough challenge. There's a lot of things in here that I think will cause some misconceptions, and so I want to go over what I think you should be aware of and what I think will be common traps for people to fall into. So the first trap is that there is a lot of self-milling in this set. And self-milling is where you take a card from the top of your library and put it in the graveyard. Let's talk about Crow of Dark Tidings. Now when you look at this card, it's a 2/1 flyer for 3, which is really fair. That's a card that I would just reasonably put in a deck. And it also mills the top 2 cards of your library. Now, there's a very common misconception when people play Magic that when you mill the top of your library, it's something that you don't want to do because you might have some good card there. Maybe it's some card that you're really excited to play, whatever. Now, here's the thing. That good card might never be drawn in the entire game. What if it's just sitting in the bottom 5 of your library? So, worrying about which card is coming off the top is really not a big deal. If you have the best card in your deck, you cast a Crow of Dark Tidings, and the best card in your deck goes into your library, that's something that doesn't even make me blink, because what I've done is I've played a card that I need to play, a 2/1 flyer, and who knows if I would have even been able to cast that card. Maybe what I need right now is this thing. So, it's always important to remember that the top of your deck is random, and there's no like, oh, if I never casted that, I would have won the game, or that kind of thing. Never worry about putting self-mill cards in your deck. There is a new mechanic called Delirium, which worries about the card types in your graveyard. Self-milling is fantastic for turning on Delirium for obvious reasons, but even if you never have a single Delirium card in your Black X deck, well, you should still have in Crow of Dark Tidings because it is a good flyer, and the cards that come off the top of your deck are just random. They don't mean anything. The next deck building mistake that I think is going to be very common is putting in too many cards that make clue tokens. So for example, Trail of Evidence. This is a card that I don't imagine would ever go in a deck that I build. Now, the thing about clue tokens is they have an upside and a downside. So the upside to cards that make clue tokens is that once you start running out of gas, then you can turn those clue tokens into new cards, and then you can keep going, which is fantastic. The downside is if you have too many clue tokens. So what's important to remember is that when you're playing a game of Magic, you only get to untap your lands so many times, right? And so you have a limited number of mana that you can make over the course of a game. So if you're trying to cast cards that you're drawing off the top of your deck, trying to cast cards that you're getting off these clue tokens, you might not have enough mana to do all of that. So a really good example of this you might find in your pre-release is you die and there are 4 clue tokens on your side of the battlefield. That's probably a sign that you're making too many. What's important to remember about the clue tokens, especially in relation to being attached to creatures, is that when they are attached to a creature, you are paying an actual price. Creatures that make clue tokens are weaker on just the sheer power and toughness than ones that don't, because you have to make up for the fact that they do give you some sort of advantage with the clue token. So if you're making too many of them, all of your creatures are a bit weaker. If you're playing against an opponent that's pressuring you heavily, all of these weak creatures are just going to be leaving behind clue tokens that you don't have time to crack. So making too many clue tokens can be a legitimate problem. Lastly, I'd like to talk about cards with madness. Now, cards with madness are strong because they allow you to cheat mana costs. The madness cost is cheaper than otherwise. And The important thing about these is you can't fill your deck with just a bunch of Madness cards. I mean, you can technically, but it would be unwise to fit it with a bunch of Madness cards without sufficient number of cards that allow you to discard cards, discard outlets. So you have to balance these. If you have too many cards with Madness, but not enough cards that allow you to discard, then your deck is going to just be overpriced overall for what you're getting. The opposite problem can happen. A lot of the cards in this set force you to discard, which allows you to play a card with Madness. However, if you have too many outlets and not that many cards with Madness, then you're being forced to discard and you're just automatically 2-for-1ing yourself too much in limited. We have to always remember that in limited formats, you can have a hard time having enough cards to continue the game. So what I want to urge people to do when they're looking at their pool is to make sure that there's a reasonable amount of things that force you to discard or allow you to discard, and a reasonable amount of things that you want to discard for their Madness or what have you. I hope those 3 little thoughts about the new set help you out when you're building with your pre-release pool. If you liked the video, go ahead and hit like. If you really liked it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And as always, I'll see you next video.